All right, let's get started with a word of prayer, and we'll get into class real quick. Dear God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the many blessings you give us, and we thank you for the freedom and the opportunity that we have to come and study your word and to learn more about you and worship you. And I ask that you just take what we learned today and what we take away from this today and take it out in the world and use it to not only grow ourselves, but to bring others to you in Christ, Lord. We ask you also be with all those who are sick and need our prayers right now. We also ask that you be with Karen Dasher and her family with the loss of Miss Ann. And just comfort them as only you can. It's in Christ let me pray. Amen. Karen Black, thank you. I knew when I said that. Well, we pray for you too, right? Oh, I am. It comes honest. I apologize for that. Yes. So, all right. So we're going to continue our study of Jesus and his ministry, and we're going to get into that here in a little bit. And I'm going to continue this on, and I'm going to continue it on in recognizing Jesus. I think that kind of applies the most important, I guess, the aspect of what I'm trying to grab here as we go through all of these, the life and study of the Gospels and of Jesus' life. But there's one thing I want to do real quick before we dive into this class. And hopefully this doesn't take real long, but I wanted to clarify something that we talked about a little bit, and I just didn't have time to dive into it. And that is the idea around church leadership. I wanted to clarify a few things because we talked about this last week, and like I said, I didn't get a chance to dive into it the way that I wanted to. What I was doing is I was talking about, we were talking about the gap in age in the generations in church leadership. So right now in the church, there's a large gap between those in leadership positions, and what we've looked at is the elder, preacher, and other groups' terminology of pastor role. And what we were looking at there is the age difference between that and the average age of, one, some of your congregations, but two, the generations coming up behind it. And so I wanted to dive a little bit back into this a little bit. So anyone want to guess what the average age in 1992 was? I'm sorry, of the minister / elder role in 1992, 25 years ago. 70? Someone said 60? 56? It was 44 years old, the average age. This is according to Barna, of elders and ministers. And elders, and this is a little bit different for us. So it was the elder / pastor / preacher role, what they considered senior leadership in the church. In 2017, I gave this number last week. In 2017, it was 54. They say by 2021 now they believe it is. Barna hasn't done a study since 2017, but they believe now. This was something I was listening to about a week ago or so. They believe now it's probably late 50s, 59, but more than likely 60 to 61. Anyone want to guess what it was in 1960? In 1960, the majority were 45 and under, on average. So those who are, from 1992 to now, those who are 65 and older tripled. And so, exactly. And so here's what, and so what I want to make sure y'all understand. I'm not trying to say, well, it's the current eldership and senior leadership's fault for where we're at in this gap and having all these problems. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this is where we're at. This is the situation. There's a lot of reasons why we're here, but we need to fix it, and we need to start looking at it. And I also understand that there's a difference between a 40-year-old or 45-year-old in the 1960s and a 40 and 45-year-old today. There's just a difference. Like Dad talked about, a lot of them had fought in World War II when they were 18 years old. That matures you a little bit. A whole bunch, yeah. And so, but my point is, all right, we're not trying to put blame anywhere here. What we're trying to say is this is where we're at, and this is having a bad effect on the church. And the reason being is as much as I would like to say when I'm in my 60s and 70s, I'll be able to connect just as well with the younger generation as I do today. That's not going to be true. And so when you have a gap on average of your average age being in their 60s in your senior leadership in your church, and you're trying to attract the younger generations, it's going to make it more difficult because there's just that gap there, and there's not a lot filling that gap in between. And so here's the other thing too I want to point out. What was some of the fastest growing times, not only in the Church of Christ growth history, but in some of the other church growth history as well? 50s and 60s, right? And then there was a lot in the 90s as well. We saw there was a larger, and I think part of the reason for that was there was a large variety of senior leadership age in most churches. And having that large group, that large diversity helps, and it helps for growth. And so that's what I'm trying to get back to. But there's one thing. So this is probably the first time in my life where I've bit my tongue, and Helen told me I shouldn't have, because this is a personal subject for me too. So I try to be careful when I speak around it. But what I wanted to do, real quick, is look at some things. So if we look, does anyone know what the Old Testament word for elder was? The position of, so the term elder or an elder position wasn't something new in the New Testament. Yeah, a lot of them were called bishops, but there was an elder term in the Old Testament as well. Does anyone know where it came from? It came from the term beard, and it meant to be able to fully grow a beard. And so most biblical scholars believe in the Old Testament time, the elder, we see several references to the elders of a community, and it wasn't just those who were older. It was a position that most scholars believe the minimum age for them would have been 30. Now again, lifespans weren't as long. There's a lot of varieties in there, but the minimum age would have been 30. And the reason for this is if you look, and most of them probably would have been mid-30s and older. Does anyone know what the average age a man would have been married in the Old Testament? And in Jesus' time as well? 17 to 18. Sometimes it's younger. Does anyone know what the average female age was in biblical time when they got married? 12 to 13. So if someone's married at 18 years old, how long before they have a family where you can kind of tell whether they're managing their household well? About 10 to 12 years, right? Maybe a little bit longer. So 30, at that age, 30 to 35. So I say all that to let's jump into real quick. And I know Steve did a study on this, and this is going to be a very quick overview of the qualifications, or what the Bible lays out is someone needs to have. And I don't know if you can read all these. Yes. Quality. I think qualities is yes, yeah. We use the term qualifications a lot of time. But yeah, this is the qualities of what an elder should be. And I put the first one on top, and it's one who has aspiration to the office. All right? That's important. If someone doesn't want to be an elder, the rest of these do not matter. All right, so just real quick. Above reproach, husband of one wife, disciplined or sober-minded, not a drunkard, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not violent and gentle, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, arrogant, or quick-tempered, not a lover of money, a good manager of his own household, not a recent convert, well thought of by outsiders, a lover of good, and they must be upright and holy. Now, if you'll notice, I put 3 asterisks beside the 3 items here. Because a lot of the discussion I saw, there were a lot of comments online and there were a lot of comments here in the class, was, well, someone needs to be old or older to be an elder. And a lot of times in the church, and not just the Church of Christ, but in church in general, we've kind of set this imaginary barrier that someone needs to be in their late 50s or early 60s to be in an eldership position. Well, and it comes around as like a lot of people say, well, with age comes wisdom. That's true. But a lot of times I've seen some 25-year-olds who are a lot wiser than the people in their 60s. So there's that doesn't always point to it. And it's not just about an age thing. That's a worldly thought. So if you take all of these qualities, what do all of these point to? Yeah, they do. But having character, I think that's true. All of these, if you take all of these things and someone hits all of these, and again, I put the asterisk there because there's only 3 of them really that would have to do with age. Right now, I think personally that a lot of these things get better as you age, hopefully. Now, I've seen them not. Husband of one wife, that's going to require an age requirement on it, right? Because typically you're going to be older, especially nowadays. I think the average of marriage age in the United States now is like mid-20s. A good manager of his own household, that's going to take age and time. And then not a recent convert. Now that doesn't necessarily add an age perspective, but obviously there has to be some time frame. Go ahead. I'm not going to dive deep into that, but I agree with that. But I don't have time to go into the dive deep into that. These all point to spiritual maturity. Yep. 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 Yeah. I think sometimes when we say not a new convert, we expect someone to be, a Christian 10, 15, 20 years. And like you said in biblical times, and I pointed to this last week, there were many of them who hadn't been a Christian much more than about a year or two. Yeah, you're getting to my point. Go ahead, Steve. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's why I put that at the top of the list. Yeah. Yeah. And here. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, well, it depends. There's a lot of factors that depend on that. Yes. In the American church, generally, how we do things, 1 year is not enough time for a person to become an elder after becoming a recent convert. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, but to your point about teaching, a lot of times, too, on that, people think, well, the able to teach is someone like me getting up here and teaching a class. I don't think that's what that qualifies. I think again, I'm going deeper than I want to, but I think being able to teach is the ability to sit with someone one-on-one and teach and help them understand. Go ahead. Yeah. New converts. Yeah. And so here's my point that I'm wanting to make on all this, and I want to clarify. Right? I'm not saying someone who's 25 years old, we should be making them elders. Right? The Bible doesn't put an age on eldership or those positions, but there are some built-in kind of defaults that you see, right? You know, the biggest one for me is they have to be a good manager of their household. Well, you're going to have to be established a while, like Steve just talked about, 10 to 12 years, before you can really realize if someone is a good manager of their household. All right? And so I'm not going to give an age, but anyways, I think we can kind of see where that goes. But here's our, and Dad referred to this a little bit. Here's where I think our failure is we have put, I think a lot of times we haven't looked at this in a spiritual mindset or a biblical mindset a lot of times. And we put a lot of these crazy, what we call qualifications, and almost make it impossible sometimes for people to get into these positions. And then the other time, I don't know, it's like we've just missed this gap. And if you look at, when we see this across the board, we've missed this gap of bringing people and bringing our younger group into leadership and growing them in leadership, and then having the necessary people available for those positions. There's a shortage across the board in preachers and in elders in the church. I mean, if you talk to anyone trying to hire a new preacher, it's almost impossible to find one now. Not say impossible. It takes a while. I mean, how long ago did Central look for a preacher, and it took them 1.5 years, 2 years? And that was 5, 6 years ago? Yeah. And most of the ones they can find at this point are the ones coming fresh out of Bible college, which even most of your preachers in leadership you talk to now, the ones coming out of Bible college haven't been adequately prepared to be a leader of a church. And so we just have this gap. And so I wrote this out, and I'm going to read it, and then we can continue on, but we can go from here. I said the problem is we look at this from a worldly perspective instead of a spiritual one. Yes, with age comes wisdom sometimes. However, that doesn't always translate into spiritual maturity and wisdom, which we should be looking for. Just because someone is older doesn't mean they are spiritually wise or mature. The Bible never puts an age limit on positions. It is always about spiritual maturity and maturity with your relationship with Christ. Yes, some of that comes with age, but if it's taking for someone to be a Christian for 30 to 40 years to be an elder, then we are really missing the mark. And so what we have to do as a church is we have to, we have the Lads of Leaders program. It's a very good program. We need to extend that out from when they hit 18 and go on. We need to be driving that. Because my thing is we have a ton of men in this church who are in their 40s and 50s and late 30s, and we can't find additional elders. And it's not just a problem here. All right? It's a problem across the board. And the reason we can't is, I personally believe we haven't done a good job of training for that or expecting of that or pushing hard enough. One of the things Dad talked about and Steve referred to is how long does it take? It shouldn't be, if someone there's people who've been born and raised in the church and they're in their 40s and 50s and they can't be an elder. Now, there's some things that they can't control around that, but we have people who just, one, they don't want it. Now, I think that's another area I don't have time to spend on. So this needs to be a major focus of ours, because if not, I personally believe this is one of the things causing the downtrend in church. We say this all the time. With leadership goes your business, right? In the business world, we always say with leadership, that's the direction that your business is going to go. It's the same thing in the church. So here's what I wanted to close on this, and here's what I've seen. Y'all know I've been studying church growth and church growth models for a long time. One of the things that I've witnessed, the churches that were growing, the churches that are growing, have a good mixture of age in their senior leadership. Typically from the mid-30s up to the 60s and 70s. And the reason there's a ton of reason we can go into why that works. But I think anyone who knows is when you have those multi-generations, they can help each other, right? The older generation helps the younger generation, keep things in between the guardrails. But the younger generation at the same time helps the older generation see, hey, these are the directions we need to be going. Because like I talked about earlier, I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but it's just hard sometimes when you get into your 60s and 70s to relate to and see and understand what's happening with a younger generation. And so I wanted to... Yep. 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 Go ahead. I agree with that. Yeah. No, I agree with that, and this goes. Sorry, continue on. Yep. No. Yep. Yep. No, I agree, and I think, and this was going to be my last point before I moved on. This is where we need to start, and we are starting this, and unfortunately, it's just going to take time to catch up. And personally, I'd like to see us maybe start a little bit younger, but not on the deaconship side. But you'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute. Is the ones that are growing the most and doing the most successful with this? They start at a very early age. They start putting their teenagers in charge of stuff that some of us would be like, oh, we can't put a teenager in charge of that. But they do. They put a teenager in charge of it with someone overseeing it, right? They don't just hand them the keys and say, all right, go, right? Go crazy with it, right? But what works is if you are handing that off, and guess what happens when you start giving 16, 17, 18-year-olds responsibility and their own say in church leadership? Yeah, 4-H is a perfect example. everything. Yep. Yep. Nope. When we lived in Kansas, I was in 4-H. And I was in 8th grade. So what age would I have been in 8th grade? I don't remember. 12, 13, 14? Oh, sometimes. They let us 12, some of us were 12, 13, 14-year-olds run oxyacetylene torches by ourselves. Now, who in this day is going to go up to Valdosta and hand over, Valdosta Middle School and say, hey, here's an oxyacetylene torch, have at it. Now, we made some interesting, fun stuff that shot tennis balls through roofs, but, we were supervised. And that's the whole idea behind 4-H. If you've ever been to the National 4-H Convention and saw the way it's run, and to know that it's run by a bunch of teenagers, we should be able to do the same thing here. Go ahead. No. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm. And so this is what this is a perfect out now is we need to start doing this with our teenagers. We need to start putting them in charge of classrooms out here. We need to start putting them in charge of things out here. All right? Because what's going to happen, I think Karen may be able to speak to this more than anyone. There's some others in here. What happens when you give that type of authority and get engagement and buy-in to the church or to any organization at that age? What happens? They stick around. They have buy-in, right? Yep. They're going to make mistakes. Yep. Yep. Because honestly, and I'm not saying here, but in the church in general, typically what we've done is we haven't let them do anything. We don't trust them a lot of times. We don't let them ask questions a lot of times. We don't let them make mistakes. Or if they do make mistakes, we just trample them under our foot, and then we wonder why they leave when they turn 18. And so this was my whole kind of what I was trying to get back to is if we can start at 16, 17, even younger than that. I remember my first class that I taught. I was in 3rd grade, and this was out of necessity because I didn't have anyone else. I was in 3rd grade, and they put me in charge of teaching the nursery. And Helen's like, all right. How many 3rd graders are going to say, hey, we want you to watch this? I remember having a 1-year-old kid downstairs in Garnett, 1 or 2 1-year-old kids, and I was in 3rd grade, and it was my job to watch them and try to teach them. That had an effect. I still remember that to this day. Yeah, they probably do. They're probably scarred for life. But yep. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and and that's true. The church is here to be an assistant or to assist parents in helping, develop their children, not be be partners in that. So anyway, I didn't mean to go this long on that, but I wanted to dive into this a little bit because I think sometimes we have a misunderstanding of this, And I think our mindset around this sometimes is we need to relook at that and reevaluate that sometimes. Again, and to clarify, again, I'm not advocating that we throw 20-year-olds in the eldership, all right? But at the same time, I'm saying we need to help develop and grow this to where if someone is 35 years old, it would be awesome if we had 35-year-olds who were ready for the eldership. Wives, yes. Yeah. Good. Yeah, good point. I'm sorry. I should not have left that side of it out. Yeah. The development of women in this is just as important. All right, you can't have good elders without good elder wives. In fact, I would say most of our best leadership in here, the reason they are really good at their leadership is because they have really good wives. Yep. Yeah. 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 Luke. Yep. I'm not going to speak to that right now. I'm not. I can give you my opinion right now, but I'm still not, because and I'll tell you why, and part of the reason I'm getting ready to go into is why, and we'll talk about some of that stuff, but yeah, there's some interesting things around all that, and I hope we get to look at that one day, but I want to get to where we're prepared to look at that, if you know where I'm getting at. So I wanted to clarify all that. So I hope, does anyone have any questions, any comments around that before I move on? Dad, go ahead. Okay. Let me put something together, and I'll throw that in the middle of what we're going through now, because I think that's I think there's a lot of things around that we could do, especially with the upcoming generations, because we have a generation of not even kids now, adults now, who, like, if you ask them what their major thing is, it used to be have a good job, have a good career, make lots of money. One of the top things now is to make a difference in the world. And when you have 3 or 4 generations of their goal is to make a difference in the world, you should be able to grab a hold of that and just run with it, especially in the church. So I think I'll look at that. I'll put something together for that, and we can throw it in the middle. All right, so to recognizing Jesus. One of the things I'm going to try changing my approach a little bit here, and there's a reason why. So if anyone was here Wednesday, I did a Devo on we need to stop reading our Bibles, okay, and start studying our Bibles. And there's a difference, and I talked about that difference. Well, I had a lot of people come up to me afterwards and give some recommendations, but I also had a lot of people come up to me and say, hey, we should start doing this. All right, let's go through the Bible verse by verse and look at it and study it. And I thought, well, I'm kind of doing that now, but I'm doing it differently. And so I'm going to change my teaching style a little bit. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't work, please let me know. Say, Chad, this is boring. You're boring us to death. I don't like it. Because I teach topically right now. And I'm going to try switching to what they call expository teaching, which is going through the Bible verse by verse. But I'm going to try to do it in a way that when I was in high school was done to us, I don't want to do it that way. And that was read the verses, and what does that mean to you? And there wasn't a lot of diving deep into it. So I'm going to try to, instead of picking a topic and then applying the verses to that, I'm going to try going through the verses and then finding the topics in there to speak to. So we'll see how it works out. If you don't like it, if it's not working, please let me know, because my goal is to not bore people. I think it should be a sin to bore people with the Bible. So I don't want to do that. But before we start into this, I want to show, has anyone in here seen this graphic before? Couple? This is a graphic that was put together. I forget the name of the guy. I should have wrote that down, and I apologize to him because the work that went into this, he deserves recognition for it. This is a data set of all the cross-references in the Bible. Anyone want to guess how many cross-references there are total in the Bible? 2,000? Thousands? 63,779 different cross-references. So you're starting over here. This is the last chapter in Revelations, all the way to the first chapter in Genesis. Each one of these bars is a chapter of the Bible. And these lines are references coming out of those that connect to another Bible verse. Now here's the thing, and I know I did the research on this a while, and I forget how many different authors there are of the Bible. Oh man, anyone remember off the top of their head how many authors are in the Bible? Yeah, anyways, there's a lot, right? And the Bible was written over how many years? Several thousand, right? About 1,500 to 2,000 years. 2,000? Sorry, I should have done my homework a little bit more on this one. All right? So here's what I want. In all of history, if we were to take a ton of writers over 2,000 years, would we ever get anything that looked like that? In the Bible, right? If God was involved. And so I want you to picture that. I want you to see where in the Old Testament they said something was going to happen, and then it happened here, and it connects back to it. Now, some of this is just quotations from it, but a lot of it's quotations of prophecies they said was going to happen, and Jesus fulfilled. When I saw that, the work that went into that, and this is actually the lowest resolution I could push. They actually have this thing to where it would fit on I think 30 TVs if you were to pull it all the way out. And it's just a massive, huge graphic that they put together. And you can just see all the blending. 66,779 cross-references. That is Psalms 119, I think. So it goes, the length of the bar is based on the length of the chapter. And I think Psalms 119 is the longest, yeah. And it's by a long shot. Yeah, how long the chapter is. So it gives you a reference of why there's so many maybe coming from one area. Yeah. Again, I wish we could drill down into this and I can on the computer drill down and you can just see all the lines. So with going through the Bible verse by verse, we could spend years going through the Bible verse by verse and talking about all the things that connect each one. I could probably spend each Bible class talking about one or two verses, and it would be 50 years before we get there. So what I'm going to try to do is hit the ones that have the most impact and just kind of go through the ones that don't seem to have the most impact or maybe more informational, run through those. I'm going to hit this. We got 5 minutes left. I'll start into this, and we may come back to it next week and go back over it again. I don't think it'll hurt to. So we left off several weeks ago with Jesus' interaction with the woman at the well. Right? So after that, because Jesus was traveling back to Galilee at this time, actually more Nazareth, when he had his encounter with the woman at the well. So we're going to look at this, and all the other thing, I'm sorry. I'm going to go through this in chronological order. I don't know, I've never seen anyone do expository teaching in chronological order of the Bible. I've seen it done by book and then chapter and verse, but I've never seen anyone do it in order, in chronological order. So I'm going to try to do that. So when I hit each subject, I'm going to give you all the Bible verses, and next week I will have I'm going to start doing detailed notes on this for everyone to have, so you're not having to try to write all this out, because it'll take a while, and I think you will miss it. But this is where Jesus starts his ministry in Galilee. Actually, I'm going to talk about this, just the points, and then we'll stop. The majority of Jesus' ministry took place here. And you'll see that as we start going through it. This was northern Israel, up around the Sea of Galilee. It was where Jesus spent most of his time. And what he usually did, he traveled from town to town. He used Capernaum as his kind of base of operations. And we'll look into next week a lot of reasons why he did that. While he was traveling from town to town, he performed many miracles. He taught extensively the Sermon on the Mount. This is where he did the Sermon on the Mount. Dad's been going through that in his Wednesday night Bible class. And then he also spent a ton of time investing and teaching and growing the 12 during this time period. That's why he spent most of the time. So what we're going to see is in Matthew, it's from chapter 4 to almost chapter 16 is the time his ministry in Galilee. In Mark, it's from Mark 1 to almost Mark 8. In Luke, it's Luke 4 to to chapter 10, and then John, it's chapters 4 through 7. And we're going to look through all that. And here's what I recommend if we continue doing this. And I know I did this the first time. I highly recommend getting you a chronological study Bible. I like this one. It's the Chronological Life Application Study Bible. It's about $25, $27 on Amazon, and they can have it to you probably Tuesday. But I'm going to use this to go through everything chronological. And then we'll dive into this. So I'm going to stop here because I don't want to stop in the middle of looking at his ministry, starting his ministry in Galilee. But this is my plan. Each subject that we hit, I'm going to give you all the Bible verses on it. We'll go through those verses, and then we'll dive deeper into the meaning and the significance around all those verses. Is everyone okay with that? Okay. You can say if you're not. Go ahead, Luke. Yeah. Well, and here's what I'm going to try to do in that, because I had a lot of people come up to me and say, hey, Chad, I just don't know how to dive deeper into the Bible. So what I'm going to try to do as we go through this, I think the best way I learn is by watching someone else and through example, right, and doing it myself. I'm going to try to do that same thing here. And so what I do is when I love my favorite thing for diving deeper is the Blue Letter Bible. It's online. They couldn't fit it into a book. It'd be a huge library of stuff. But they have an app for it on your phone if you want to download it, because you can dive into a verse. You can grab up whatever version you're looking at, and you can dive into it, and you can dive into the Greek. And it runs parallel the Greek with the English side by side, and then you can dive into it and say, hey, well, what does this word really mean? And you can dive into the Greek. And then they'll have a ton of not only people showing you how to pronounce it, but then go into the definitions of it everywhere else it's in the Bible, right? And so you get a true understanding and meaning of what that Greek word really is, and so, or Hebrew word really is. So that's my favorite way of doing it, and I think works best for me. And so what I'm going to try to do is, as we go through the class, I'm going to try to do that and show you how I do that. And so maybe then as you go home and study, because the goal of this class is y'all go home and study on your own as well. And so you can do that same type of deeper dive into what does this mean. And then also commentaries and things like that as well. There's some that I dive into as well. All right, it's 10:16. We'll get started next week and go through Jesus' ministry in Galilee and further on. Thank you. Probably